Welcome to Deadball TV's Top 15 Asian Nation Power Rankings video. This is the first time I'm ever making a video like this, and this is a living and breathing list, so don't freak out if your team isn't exactly where you want it to be, okay? I'm gonna update this either every single international window or at the very least every other international window. Honestly, it depends how many likes we get on this video, so it's kind of in y'all's hands. Maybe I'll even extend this to the top 20 power rankings, but probably not, because quite frankly, if you're outside of the top 15, you don't really deserve to be mentioned, do you? Either way though, if you guys like videos about Asian football, make sure you hit subscribe, stick around, check out the rest of our Asian footy playlist here on Deadball TV, the best channel on YouTube for Asian footy content. And of course, y'all gotta let me know your power rankings, at least your top 5 or top 10 down below in the comments. Before I go through this team by team, just a little criteria how I made my list. Basically anything 2022 or before, and yes, I'm including the World Cup, I don't really care about. That's not really factored into my ranking at all. Kind of the furthest back that I went and gave any clout to was the Asian Cup, and of course there is an extra emphasis on maybe the last 6 months of football, but that isn't the entire scoring criteria I used for each team. You know, I'm trying to look at this as holistically as I possibly can without pulling up fixtures that are completely irrelevant. So without further ado, I will give you guys my two first honorable mentions who did not crack the top 15, and that is Oman and Palestine. One win combined from these teams in 8 games so far in round 3, and honestly I couldn't really tell you guys which one is better, but good for us, they play each other in the next window in November, so we're about to find out. Oman has been on kind of a downturn since 2022. I mean, they did the double against Malaysia in round 2, but Malaysia are in complete free fall right now, so I'm not sure how much of an achievement that actually is. And Palestine, bro, your last good win was honestly 18 months ago. I really need to see Palestine beat somebody not named Bangladesh before I can put you in the top 15 teams in Asia. Like, I'm sorry, man. You guys had 2 chances to beat Lebanon, and you failed me twice. So those are the first 2 out. Moving on to number 15, I got North Korea. Now, this team scores goals, period. Now, their defense and their goalkeeper are pretty bad, but still, I think scoring is the hardest thing to do in football, and North Korea are quite good at it. And honestly, if it was not for 2 missed penalties in round 3, I'm not even kidding y'all, these guys would be 3rd in the group sitting on 6 points or something like that. And so that's the main reason I have them here, because I think performance-wise, they're certainly a top 15 team in Asia. They've been a little unlucky with the results, but that doesn't really matter too much to me. The fact is they don't have a single win from their first 4 games, despite playing pretty good football against some very good opposition. 15th is about as high as I can put them. Moving on to 14, we have Kyrgyzstan. Now, Kyrgyzstan after the Asian Cup, not in my top 15, not in my top 20, probably not even in my top 25. In fact, if there's any team that I'm surprised is in my top 15 power rankings, it's Kyrgyzstan, because these guys look like they were in absolute chaos. Probably the worst Asian Cup performance aside, these guys have kind of started to cook lately. Joel Kojo actually looks like a proper center forward. Their wingers have been very impressive in round 3. They're holding the North Korean attack at bay, and pretty much across the board, everybody stepped up. Now, I want to be very clear. Kyrgyzstan could plummet in the rankings in my next video, but I feel like I have been very harsh on Kyrgyzstan, and I haven't given them a lot of love that much on Deadball TV. So here's me extending the olive branch to the Kyrgyz fan base and putting you guys at 14th, which I would say is fair. But if you guys think I'm a bloody tyrant, you can let me know in the comments. Why I can't go higher than 14 is because this team has a lot of losses on the schedule, including getting absolutely destroyed by an out-of-form Qatar 3-1 in the last window, but they've also beaten at least some decent teams, namely North Korea and Oman, so they're not a poor team, they're just very beatable. They got UAE and Iran in the next window, so like I said, they are either going to jump up to maybe even 12th or 11th overall, or they might drop out of the top 15. Moving on to 13, we have Indonesia. Now, Indonesia are incredible at beating Vietnam and the rest of Southeast Asia, and they're pretty terrible at beating anyone else. I was looking back at the last 2 years, and their victory against the highest FIFA-ranked opponent during that time was Curacao, who are ranked 87th in the world. And as somebody who lives in a CONCACAF region, I can tell you Curacao are pretty terrible. Now, this is a power ranking video, guys, okay? Keep that in mind before you just swan dive into the comments saying I have 0 ball knowledge and I hate Indonesia, which are all rumors completely unfounded. This list is not the Asian countries with the highest potential list, or the Asian countries that have naturalized the most Dutch players list, because if it was, then Indonesia, yeah, they probably would be top 10. Here's what I need to see from Indonesia to put them higher than this. Win a game. Beat anybody outside of the Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, bro. I'm so sick and tired of this. You guys even lost to China in the last window, who looked like they were on their way to being the worst team we've ever seen in round 3 of qualifying. Spoiler alert, China ain't in my top 15. This team is young, this team has potential, this team doesn't beat anybody. So until then, 13th, bro, that's the ceiling for Indonesia. I'm sorry. Moving on to number 12, I have Thailand. There is no other way to say it. Thailand straight up deserved to be in round 3 of qualifying. I was going back and forth before about whether it was Tajikistan or Thailand who were the, best team to get eliminated in round 2. And after we've seen the recent performances of both sides, I think it's hands down Thailand. This team lacks goal scoring. That is a problem. It's a problem for a lot of teams in Asia, but if you just look at the individual technical ability of Thailand, and again, performance-wise, what does the football look like? How fluid is the attack? These guys are a very entertaining and a very skilled national team. And if you look at the results, they've really held their own against some good teams. I'm talking draws against Saudi Arabia at the Asian Cup, drawing Korea in World Cup qualifying, Oman, Iraq in a friendly. They've beaten Kyrgyzstan in the Asian Cup, and they've beaten Syria most recently 2-1 in the King's Cup final. And so that is why I narrowly have Thailand above Indonesia. By the way, Indonesia hasn't beaten Thailand in 9 years or something like that. So that's just another point to quell the mob. This AFF championship or Asian championship 2024 is going to hit so hard, bro. If we get a Thailand-Indonesia final, ooh, that's going to be so nice. It might be a U23 tournament, but who cares? I'll use it as a data point regardless. That is why I have Thailand above Indonesia, because not only do Thailand have the same quantity and the same caliber of good draws, if you want to call it that, they have victories as well against teams that aren't in Southeast Asia. All that being said, unfortunately, I don't really see Thailand going up in my power rankings because of the fact that they're not in round 3. So unless Thailand start getting some really good friendlies against, a team like Russia, which I believe was canceled last window, if they start friendling like South American nations or CONCACAF nations or other UEFA nations, and they start getting victories in those friendlies, maybe they can go up. But I really am going to struggle putting Thailand any higher than 13th or 12th, I guess, just because of the fact that they're already eliminated from the World Cup. At number 11, we have Bahrain. And look, I'm not excited to have these guys here either. I think they play absolutely dead football, but they're still a borderline top 10 side in Asia. They have wins against Jordan and Malaysia at the Asian Cup. Let's not forget they won the group. I know it was Jordan B side on the final game, but who cares? They beat Australia. As fluky as it was, it's still a W. They just got to draw away against Saudi Arabia. I mean, bruh, Bahrain aren't interested in playing football. They're not here to entertain you. They don't want a bunch of neutrals to become fans of the national team. They just want to go to the 2026 World Cup, and they are doing just enough in pretty much every single game except against Japan to do that. I'm not sure if Bahrain will ever go up in my rankings. I mean, I guess if they get another win against Saudi Arabia at home, or they beat Australia at home, or draw Japan away, then maybe they could crack 10 or 9th, but I think these boys are going to be here for a while. At number 10, we have the UAE. Now, there's a lot of talent in this UAE squad, guys like Al Ghassani, Ali Saleh, Suhail as well, but they're just not very inspiring, are they? Let's not forget these guys lost on penalties to Tajikistan, who look like they're just collapsing before our very eyes in the round of 16 at the Asian Cup. And their only victory in that tournament was against Hong Kong on the group stage. The midfield is pretty terrible. The defense is okay. They do have a good goalkeeper. They have some of the pieces here. I just think Paulo Bento, he ain't the guy. He's not a terrible manager, but I don't think he really wants to be here. I think he's the Mancini of the Emiratis, just without any of the clout and, probably half of the salary as well. I'm looking at some of these results, man. They didn't do the double against Bahrain. That's kind of concerning. Killed by Uzbekistan away. I know the final score was 1-0, but performance-wise, it was far worse than that. Barely survived at home against North Korea thanks to a Khalid penalty save. The one good moment I can think of is when they killed Qatar away in the first World Cup qualifying match. The rest of the results aren't terrible. They did beat Costa Rica 4-1 in a friendly. They beat Thailand 2-0. Like I said, they beat Bahrain 2-0 in round 2. They aren't bad wins, but this UAE side is doing nothing spectacular, doing nothing incredible. They have counter-attacking threat. They're going to be moderately scary in every single game, but they look far away from becoming an elite side. Like, they also, similar to Bahrain, kind of look like they're going to be stuck in that like 9th through 11th ranking for the rest of time. And moving on to number 9, I have the Asian Cup champions, Qatar. I mean, for God's sake, have we ever seen a national team that is carried so hard by a single player? And yes, I'm talking about Akram Afif, and I will give a special shout out to Almoz Ali, but this is really the Afif show. By the way, Afif just won Asian Player of the Year for the 2nd time in a row. Like, the dude is an absolute stud. Now, the rest of the team is shambolic, especially Barsham, the goalkeeper, and this defense, who look like they can't keep a clean sheet against anybody. Nobody can take the Asian Cups away from Qatar, right? But they are in serious jeopardy of not qualifying for the 2026 World Cup. And just because they won the Asian Cup doesn't mean I have to have them power ranked in my top 3 or top 5 or number 1, in fact. You know, little side tangent. I was going to do the first edition of this series immediately after the Asian Cup, and I had Qatar at 4 after winning the trophy. Like, immediately after, I bumped them from 9 to 4. And then I think we've seen, after having the easiest group ever conceived in round 2, Group A with Afghanistan, India, and Kuwait. And now what they look like when they're playing against genuine opposition, I cannot go higher than 9th for Qatar. And I mean, if Akram Afif is injured, they'll probably finish last in the group. I mean, or 5th at best. I mean, it really is crazy how much of a purple patch they hit for the Asian Cup. They don't have any really terrible losses on the record. I mean, maybe UAE at home is bad, but overall, they've done enough to be top 10. Bro, tune in for the next edition of this, because they could be 13th, 14th, they could be out of the top 15. I mean, I really don't know with Qatar. Talk to me after they play Uzbekistan. Moving on to number 8 is another Asian giant, and that is Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia are 8th because of talent and because of the Hervé Renard XP boost. We haven't even seen them play again under Hervé Renard, but I have so much respect for this man. They're ahead of Qatar. Looking at some of the recent results, they lost to Jordan at home in the final game of round 2. They beat Oman and 9-man Kyrgyzstan at the Asian Cup. It was overall a pretty pathetic performance for them. They have losses to Bolivia, Venezuela, Costa Rica, Mali, and South Korea in friendlies. 0 wins at home in the first 3 matches of round 3 of World Cup qualifying. First ever loss to Japan 2-0 on Saudi soil. It is literally the definition of peak. This is a historically bad Saudi Arabian stretch of form. Now, everything can be fixed with 6 points during the next window. If they do that, I can probably, depending on how other teams play, bump them to like 7th or 6th, something like that. But this team has a lot of making up to do. And I think Saudi Arabia are the most underperforming team in Asia, bar none. Moving on to 7, we have the Lions of Mesopotamia, Iraq. Now, Iraq have a lot of good pieces. They have one of the better managers in Asia, and Jesus Casas. They have Ayman Hussein, who is no doubt a top 3 striker in Asia. They have Ali Jassim, Bayesh. They have incredible pieces around him. They have a good, strong midfield. They got good fullbacks, you know, guys like Dolsky. But the performances, which I factored in heavily into my rankings, have been a little underwhelming. Now, Iraq beat Japan at the Asian Cup, and that's a massive W. I don't care if Zion Suzuki was in goal. I don't care if Hiroki Ito was in goal. That's a massive achievement. And if not for some questionable refereeing decisions, they probably would have been minimum a semifinal team. But outside of that Japan result, the rest of their games haven't been incredible. They have what I would call some good losses. You know, I'm talking like a 1-0 to Colombia. We got draws with India on here. We got draws with Thailand, losses to Russia 2-0 in a friendly, consecutive losses against South Korea, albeit they didn't look particularly poor in either game. But there's a couple other teams ahead of them in my power rankings that I just think simply would never get results like this. Would they beat Japan? Maybe not, but they also wouldn't drop as many points that Iraq have dropped against inferior opposition. I don't personally think I'm being insulting by having Iraq 7th. I think that's a pretty dang accurate placement for them. I mean, you can't make the argument they're top 5. Maybe you could say they're 6th. I just need to see them beat Jordan in the next window. If they beat Jordan at home, they're probably 6th, baby. I'm telling you right now. But 4 goals in 4 games to open qualifying, couple of just snooze fests at home against Oman and Palestine, it's not enough to be considered elite, at least not yet. Moving on to number 6, maybe another surprise here because it's another Asian giant, I got Australia. Now, Tony Popovich could have the Socceroos back in the top 3, but until I see a couple good results, I'm pretty comfortable with them outside of the top 5. Australia completely dog-walked round 2, but it probably was the second most trash group behind Group A. I mean, they had Palestine, Lebanon, and Bangladesh, and the Socceroos were consistently scoring like 3 to 4 goals a game. Where is that in round 3? This team has kind of lost their incredibly stingy defensive identity, albeit a good draw against Japan away at the Saitama, and they're not really scoring the goals either. So they're not in free fall, they're just answering a lot of questions. Australia, I gotta dock them points because you didn't beat Indonesia away and you lost to Bahrain, bro. Like, I'm not keeping you in the top 5. As fluky as those games were, I don't care. But I'm gonna be as fair as possible, and if they pick up 6 in the next window, or if they start balling again, Socceroos back in the top 5. I really don't need to see much. I just need to see that Popovich is kind of refreshing a squad that has gone super stale. And I think he's already started to do that. We saw it in his first 2 games in charge. I've talked a lot about some of the results for the other teams. If I'm looking at Australia, right, and I'm just asking myself, what was their last good win? And that doesn't mean beating Palestine 5-0, okay, or beating Lebanon. I'm talking who was a good team that Australia beat, didn't draw, beat, and you genuinely have to go back to the 2022 World Cup when they beat Denmark. Like, that's how long ago it's been since Australia put 3 points on the board against one of the big boys. So I think I'm being fair with Australia 6, but you guys let me know in the comments. At number 5, we have Uzbekistan. And I might be the first person in the history of Asian YouTube to put Uzbekistan in the top 5. I mean, I think it's a fine margin between Uzbekistan and Australia, but kind of my main argument for Uzbekistan being in that 5th position is I don't think this current Australia, under Graham Arnold or Popovich, can go 3 straight games against Iran without losing. I think Australia lose at least one of those. Uzbekistan also have 3 wins from 4 to start round 4 of qualifying against better teams than Australia's played, and the Aussies only have 1 win. And Australia have played Bahrain, China, and Indonesia, for God's sake. I'm still factoring in a little bit of the Asian Cup, like I said at the beginning of the video. And let's not forget a pretty ravaged Uzbekistan squad tied Australia 1-1 in the group stage, and they were the better team in that game. I think similar to Iraq, they have been underwhelming to start round 3 as well a little bit. Like, I have very high expectations for both teams, especially the White Wolves, and so I don't like these kind of 1-0 score lines. But the difference between Uzbekistan and Australia in Iraq is they've won and they're on 10 points. Like, for Australia and Iraq, winning the group already looks like it's not a possibility, but the Uzbeks, albeit a long shot because Iran are just bulletproof, they could still do it. And so I think once we start getting into this top 6 of Asia, it's really fine margins, but I have to give the Uzbeks the top 5 until they drop points. I mean, Uzbekistan have literally gone band for band with Iran since the start of 2023, and Iran are like top of Asia, so I don't think a lot of other sides could do that. Again, I have kind of a couple bullet points for why they're in the 5th spot, but I'm pretty comfortable with the Uzbeks at number 5. Moving on to number 4, I do have Jordan, arguably the best attack in Asia, obviously finalists at the Asian Cup, playing some of the best footy at the Asian Cup. I'm still factoring that into my ranking here, and these are some crazy results. In the last year, these are some of the teams that Jordan have beat. You might want to buckle up. Qatar, Palestine, Oman, Iraq, Tajikistan, South Korea, Saudi Arabia. Stop it, bro. If you don't have Jordan top 5, you are a straight hater. I don't think there's another team in Asia who's caught better bodies than Jordan has in the last 18 months, if you want to say that. Maybe you could say Japan have beat better teams if we're extending it back to the World Cup, which I'm not. They've been a little inconsistent to start round 3. They have 8 goals through 4 games, and they're, sitting second behind South Korea. That's really the one thing holding these guys back, is keeping their star players healthy and being consistent game in and game out, because they're putting in a kind of a meh performance, and then they're scoring 3 goals. And then it's another meh performance, and then they win 4-0. I just need to see a consistent international window, ideally a couple international windows in a row from the Jordanians. And if they can beat Iraq away in Basra next window, which I'm not saying is going to happen, that's not a prediction. I'm saying if they do, you literally have to have them maybe even top 3, bro. I mean, no, that's crazy. Clip that. Actually, keep that in. Keep me humble. No, they would stay 4. Now, if Iraq beats Jordan like 3-0 or something in November, I mean, we're going to have to shuffle the deck again. I told y'all this is a living, breathing list. list. This is going to be moving quite a bit from window to window. So for now, I got Jordan 4, but they could definitely fall. Moving on to number 3, the third best team in Asia in my power rankings, I have South Korea. Korea have been far from their best for a while now. I think they're still licking their wounds a little bit from the Klinsmann era. I think everybody hates the KFA. I think the vibes and the juju in the locker room are probably some of the worst it's ever been with the Korean national team, and yet despite that, they're still undoubtedly a top 3 side in Asia. Similar to Jordan, if you look at some of the teams that South Korea has beaten in the last 18 months, Saudi Arabia twice, Australia, Tunisia, Iraq, Bahrain, Thailand, Jordan, that's a pretty dang good resume if you want to put it like that. Now, the reason I didn't put South Korea top 2 is because they do have some bad results on the recent schedule. I'm talking a lackadaisical 1-0 victory against China. I'm talking drawing Thailand in World Cup qualifying. When they beat Saudi Arabia, it was on penalty kicks, so I maybe docked a quarter of a point for that. I'm not trying to hate on South Korea. I mean, I have them third. I think third is fair. I can't think of an argument for them to be top 2, but if they win out the rest of round 3 and maybe, some of the teams in the top 2 drop points, then we can have a conversation. Because on paper, South Korea is hands down a top 3 team. Performance-wise, are they a top 3 team? Maybe. They're a top 4 team performance-wise. So on aggregate, I'm just going to put them third. Simply put, I need to see more from the field, aka the teams beneath South Korea, before I can drop them any further. And in second, we have Iran. The biggest issue with Iran, similar to Jordan, is consistency, but the difference between an inconsistent Jordan and an inconsistent Iran is an inconsistent Jordan loses games, and an inconsistent Iran wins games. It's just 1-0 and super boring. In fact, you could maybe even argue that Iran are the most inconsistent Asian powerhouse. I swear to God, I feel like these guys are like Bitcoin or something. Like they're going up 300% one game and they come crashing back down, and this is a team that deals with a heavy burden of expectation from their fan base. They're a very scrutinized team. The Iranian fan base expects a lot and demands a lot from these guys, and I think it gets to the players sometimes. On top of the fact that, the federation in the background and issues with the government is a complete disaster, and I have a lot of sympathy for Iran having to deal with that BS. And despite all the BS, they still hardly ever lose. I mean, in the last game against Uzbekistan, that was the perfect opportunity for Iran to fold. That was the perfect opportunity for Iran to say, this generation, maybe we're cooked. They go down a man, they're playing away in Tashkent, and they arguably are the better side in that game. Actually, inarguably the better side in that game, and are kind of unlucky with a non-penalty call late. It might be dinosaur football at times, Sardar Azmoun might love horses more than footy, but Iran are still kings. Again, I need to see more from the field, the teams beneath them, before I can push them outside of the top 2. They don't have the craziest resume. I'm looking at some victories. They have UAE, Palestine, Qatar, Jordan, Uzbekistan in the Kafa Cup final. That's still a very, very good batch of results, and I also like that Iran are one of the few teams in Asia that can consistently leave the AFC and still win games. I mean, we got teams like Jordan, teams like Thailand, like whenever they leave, Indonesia losing to Libya, some of these teams in Asia, they become very accustomed to winning within the continent, but when they have to go outside the borders, they get absolutely slaughtered. And Iran just aren't one of those teams, simply put. In number 1, my best Asian national team in the first ever edition of the Power Rankings is Japan. They are the best team on paper. They have the highest amount of goals scored in round 3. You look at them in the Asian Cup, though, and there's a bit of vulnerability. Like, I'm not going to just gas up Japan for the next 5 minutes because we all know that they're good. We all know they have the best players. But they lost to Iran at the Asian Cup in the quarterfinals, which is nothing short of a colossal L. They played better against Australia than the Australians looked against the Japanese. They dropped points in that game. So Japan are a 1, but they cannot be complacent. Like, I think if Japan drops some more points in round 3 and Iran continues to just win out, why can't I put Iran number 1 above Japan? Like, Japan aren't like, what should I say, preordained to be the best team in Asia for the rest of time. Like, I love this Japanese side. I love the Samurai Blue. I only have like 7 jerseys of the national team. A lot of my favorite players are Japanese, but they need to start validating the hype a little bit more. Beating Bahrain 5-0, China 7-0, that's great. Nobody cares that much. You're supposed to beat Bahrain 5-0. You're supposed to beat China. Maybe not 7-0, but you're supposed to beat China. Japan, I think they're number 1, but they could definitely fall. And I think the person who would be most responsible for that fall is Hajime Moriyasu, who I'm still just not really sold on as a manager. I think they've actually looked better with some of their key players missing recently. Very curious to see with the reintroduction of some of those guys, how that changes the team going forward. But I am still going to put Japan number one. They're one of the few teams in Asia that can go to Europe and consistently beat Spain, Germany, whoever else it is. They can beat teams in Africa. They can beat teams from CONMEBOL. They can beat everybody. They can dog walk the U.S. men's national team. Whoever it is, Japan can beat them, but they're not quite as invincible. They're not quite as hard-bodied as even an Iran is. So they're number one, but not by like the craziest chasm of all time. I really don't think that the difference is quite as big as how I used to feel. 2 years ago, I would have said it's like an ocean distance between Japan and Iran, or Japan and Australia, or whoever was number two. I don't really think that anymore, but they still are my number one. So that is the list, guys. Let me know what you think of my first ever edition of the AFC Power Rankings down below in the comments. If you guys enjoyed this video, please drop it a like, hit subscribe for the next edition of this series, and of course for my AFC November qualifiers predictions video, and of course analysis video, and maybe even some live streams. If you're listening on streaming platforms, please give the podcast a 5-star rating. Check us out on social media. The link is in the description. I appreciate you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.